Greetings, Ohio Valley. This is Dan Lima with OSU Extension from Belmont County.
And this is Karen Cox from WVU Extension in Ohio County. Thanks for tuning in to Extension Calling, your source for research-based information for the farm, garden, and home. COVID-19 vaccines were given to tens of thousands of people in early clinical trials and to hundreds of millions of Americans since. Top health experts agree that COVID-19 vaccines are safe, effective, and trusted. Visit vaccinate.wv.gov or contact your local health department. All right, so this time of year is the time of year where a lot of people are actually starting to think about trees a little bit more. And we just wanted to throw out a different type of thinking about trees and start talking a little bit about forest management and timber harvests.
Yeah, I figured we could go ahead and today discuss the way you can make $1 million off some of your forested land, right?
I don't know about that, but there are a lot of ways that you can make money off of your woodlands. And, there's one that's being talked about right now that we're not going to focus on today, but I just want to throw it out there, and that's carbon credits. So you can sell carbon credits for your woodlands if you have, I believe, a 20-acre is the minimum. But even in urban forests, there's programs which allow you to sell basically that you're going to leave your tree standing and you're going to help keep them healthy. So you can get payments on a regular basis for just having the trees stay there.
Yeah, Karen, and that's something that is just now unfolding. I know, just because you started off with that, here we go. But it is something that is fairly new. We talk about carbon sequestration as a business model, and they have shown that consumers will preferentially buy things that come from companies that have that kind of global warming conscience about them, and they're doing programs to offset their carbon cost. And you're right. One of the things that they're looking into is because forests are so good at pulling down that CO2 from the atmosphere, putting it into the ground. If these companies sponsor that kind of management, they can say, our products are made by this way, and we as a company have a conscience that we're going to offset the CO2 footprint by this much, in order to, one, it is a good thing to do for the environment, but two, it's also just a great way to engage that consumer that has that environmental conscience about them, and that will pay a little extra for knowing that their money is going to a company that has that capability and is doing these things.
Right. And it's also part of a lot of different locations where they have carbon neutral guidelines that they're trying to meet and things like that. But what that means for the small forest landowner is simply that you can get a little bit of money for having your timber stay timber. And when you're looking at these wider areas of timberlands where you've got the hills of West Virginia, Southern Ohio, there's a lot of forests out there. And for a small landowner who's maybe trying to fight against development pressures or who could use a little extra money and may want to convert their timberland into grassland so that they can graze more, it's just another thing that you can add into your portfolio to allow you to think about, okay, well, if I do this, then maybe I'll get enough money through that to be able to balance out the time it's going to take for these woodlands to grow into timberlands. So when you're looking out into your woods, you want to think about the different aspects that your woodlands can offer. And so when you're starting all of these things out, you want to think about the different objectives for your land. Just like when you're looking at your farmland or your garden, you have a plan, what you want to do, what you want to get out of it. Well, when you have woodlands, you can think about those things as well. The difference is that with woodlands, you're thinking on a 50, 100, 500-year basis. And woodlands take a long time and they don't react well to mistakes. And so when we're looking as our mere human life cycle of, you want to talk about 80 years as a conscious and thinking adult, that's nothing compared to a forest. And so when we're making decisions, we can mess things up pretty badly if we don't think ahead to the future.
Yeah, and I want to piggyback on that point you just made, and I want to backtrack a little bit because we were talking about these carbon credit contracts that you can get into with these companies. These are contracts, and these are just like your management for your woods are going to be years and years into the future. So, and it's something that's just now emerging. So be very cautious when signing these things as well. I just want to make sure people understand with everything that you're doing as far as leasing goes.
Oh yeah, any legal contract.
They can put you in a bad situation if you have a bad lease. So just be very cautious when signing anything. Like what were those general rules? Never sign anything on the hood of a truck.
Yep. Yep.
and always consult an attorney. I think the idea is understand that you're signing basically something that's going to live with you and probably live with the next generation minimally.
Right. Well, you think about...
So take your time. Take your time with it.
Just like we did with the oil and recommendations with oil and gas contracts, read the fine print, know what all the words mean, and get someone to help you.
Here's the thing, though. We had to learn it the hard way, like in this part of the world, right? Even in Western Pennsylvania. A lot of people had to learn it the hard way. With the carbon sequestration thing going on, you might get some landowners that aren't very familiar with leasing, and they could potentially put themselves in a bad situation.
Yeah, most of the things I've seen with carbon sequestration contracts, especially designed for small landowners, it's been more of a penalty. So if you say that I'm going to maintain this timberland for 20 years and you harvest it in 10, then you have to pay back the balance of the carbon that those trees would have been taking up for that 10 years that you said that they would stay there.
But even that could put somebody in a bad situation, right?
Oh, yeah, most definitely. That's a couple house payments in there,
Now, all of a sudden, you're incurring a lot of debt because you did a 10-year timber harvest, and it might not have been you. It might have been your son or your daughter that decided, hey, it's a good time for timber harvest. All of a sudden now, they're getting all these legal letters and that kind of stuff. Communication and clarity. And honestly, take your time with making decisions because that's key right there.
Yeah. And, you touched on something really important, and that is communication. When you're looking at woodlands, you're talking about more than one generation. And just like a farm that you're hoping to pass down, a lot of people want to pass down their woodlands as well. And whenever you're making a forest management plan, it's very important to pull in the objectives of the next generation. So let's say that your kids, they love hiking or hunting, and they want to come onto the property and they want to manage it for hiking and hunting. So you have one child that wants to hike and one child that wants to hunt. And both of those don't have to be mutually exclusive, but they do have to be on the table when you're starting a management plan. And I'm just going to throw out there right now that when you are looking at developing a forest management plan, we highly recommend that you work with a consultant forester. So foresters know a lot about how to manage woodlands, but also they know a lot about how to sell timber. They've been trained to think in those long-term 100-year rotations that you have to think in when you're thinking about a healthy forest land. Because if you go out and you start making a management plan and then you completely ignore it, then you're potentially impacting the ability of your woodlands to provide that resource in the relative near future, which we'll say is 50 years for a woodlot.
Yeah, and let's also not forget that timber is an agricultural product. I'm surprised you haven't said that in this show yet, Karen. but timber is an agricultural product, and it does fall under the current agricultural use value, which is a county-based program to lower your property taxes on land that's being used for agriculture. And it varies county to county, state to state for sure. But one of the things, at least I can speak of in Belmont County, Ohio, is that you can't put your forested land under current agricultural use value until you have a forest management plan, unless something's changed. But I think it's a great way to make sure, one, these forest management plans are designed to give you higher quality products and possibly increase the amount of times the land can be timbered. One of the things Karen said was, a bad mistake could cost you generations.
Oh, yeah.
So this is a way to prevent those mistakes from happening and possibly get you more money when you do harvest that timber. So it kind of really works out to your benefit at that timber harvest and during the process of getting to that timber harvest, because you do have that tax break from the CAUV by complying with certain standards from the state, from foresters. And, these programs add value to both the environment and your pocketbook in this case. And the only thing that I'm a little wary of, Karen, is when we talk about those carbon sequestration programs, I don't know how forest management plans fall into that kind of contract. So that's just something that I'm just going to throw out there because it would be something that needs to be investigated because all this is so new.
Right, yeah. And so with carbon sequestration, that's basically, like I said, you are agreeing to leave your trees standing for X number of years. And that's typically how those programs work. So I don't want to get too much into that because I really haven't prepared for that subject.
Yeah, I was just saying contracts are contracts. And if it needs to be undisturbed, that undisturbed can mean a lot of things. And that's the only point that I really wanted to make, Karen.
From what I've seen, most of them do have management allocations in them. So let's say that you have a young forest and you need to do a thinning cut so that your trees can grow a little bit faster and straighter, and you want to weed out some poor species or whatever. Anyway, if you want to do those types of management activities that are going to improve the health of the forest, those typically are not excluded in those contracts. But you're very right in that you need to be aware of what your long-term goals are before you sign any contracts.
I think it can be conflicting goals here. Carbon sequestration is just a way to put carbon into the ground. So even the thinning.
No.
I mean,
I'm going to stop you right there.
Part of it.
I'm going to stop you right there because in timberland, you're putting the carbon into the wood.
Okay.
And by harvesting the trees and keeping them as wood, you are stopping them from decaying and releasing that carbon back into the air.
Okay.
So there's two ways that are going to sequester carbon here. It's going to be in the soil, yes, but in a forest land, most of the carbon is being sequestered in the trees themselves.
That's and I'm sorry, I misspoke when I said that, but that's what I'm saying. At least you have a land area. The carbon sequestration wants to capture the carbon and keep it there, not in the atmosphere. Maybe I shouldn't have said ground, but
yeah,
keep it there. So. And you're right. It really depends on the contract. So thinning the trees could conflict with the contract depending on the way it was written and what the goals are for the company and yourself if you're doing a forest management plan. So
right.
It can get real complicated. That's why I just wanted to say don't rush out and jump on these contracts. Right.
Yes. So when you're looking at your woodlands, though, like Dan was saying, that it can be a way to reduce, to get involved with a timber management plan or a forest management plan. It doesn't have to be timber focused, but having that plan allows you to access that lower tax bracket. And there's also the tree farm program where you can be a certified tree farm, and that means that you are working towards timber as an agricultural product. And there's some funding available out there, and being in the tree farm program has a few benefits as well. If you have questions about the tree farm program, then just, reach out to me and I can get you some information on that. And it's the American Tree Farm Program. So it's not just a West Virginia thing, but it is run in West Virginia. It is run by the West Virginia Forestry Association. So let's get a little bit more into why a management plan is something that's going to benefit you. And let's just talk money, right? Because that's where a lot of minds are right now. You're getting ready to, you're watching the economy and you're thinking about inflation. You're thinking about how are you going to pay for your kids' education? There's a lot of different reasons that you might be looking out into your woodlands and seeing some dollar signs right now. But you want to make sure that the management plan is going to represent what you want as a financial goal as well as a spiritual or aesthetic goal. So if you, say, have some grandkids and you want to help pay for their college education, let's say they're toddlers right now, well, that gives you a good 15 to 18 years that you can start to manage your trees a little bit better. It's a really short term in a forest stand, though. So you may not be able to get a college education out of your woodlot in that period of time, depending on what trees you have. So when you're looking at the size of trees, that's really going to influence the value of those trees. So if you have a tree that's 6 inches or larger, say 6 to 12 inches, you're looking at pulpwood. The only thing they can use the trees of that size for is like fence posts or pulpwood, which is more likely what a logger is going to sell it for. Now, I know a lot of people want to have fence posts that are black locust, and harvesting a smaller diameter tree, say like 4 or 3 inch diameter, that's going to give you a nice black locust fence post and a coppice stand where you're just letting the rootstock sprout back and sprout back and sprout back. And that's a good way to manage for that particular output. But if you're looking for timber, you need to have minimum sawlog size is 12-inch diameter. And when you have a young forest stand, not all your trees are going to be of sawlog size, but also you need to consider sawlog quality. So if a tree has low limbs because it was more open grown, then it's not going to be as high a quality. Whereas if it is thinned at the proper time, not too early, not too late, that's going to increase the quality of those saw logs in addition to helping them get to size faster. Traditionally in this area and much of West Virginia and probably Ohio as well, people have harvested their trees based on the size of the logs. So they do what's called a diameter limit cut, which is where they go in and say, I'm only going to take out the trees that are 16 inches in diameter or larger. And loggers love this because it gives them the most valuable trees out of your woodlot. But it's not necessarily the best option for your forest, because what you might be leaving behind is trees that are of lower quality or species that are of lower quality. And you want to make sure that when you're doing a harvest, that you are keeping some of those larger trees so that they can become even larger trees. And that's why it's so critical to work with a forester, because they can go out and they can say, hey, look, this tree is probably going to be, a medium value tree now, but 20 years from now, 15 years from now, it's going to be a high value tree. So maybe you don't want to harvest just yet, especially if you're looking towards that child who's going to need a bunch of money in a very short period of time, right? So if you're looking at those long-term objectives, you can say, well, maybe I'll just do a thinning cut now, open up these trees so that they can grow a little bit faster and put on a little bit more value, but also protect them by keeping those lower limbs shaded out. So having a thinning cut done can increase your value of your forest land a significant amount for that later harvest that you're hoping for.
Yeah, Karen, one time I did hear a forester talk, and he was talking about just that. The idea that if you clear cut, you take everything out and there's nothing left over. You make so much, and then you can't do it again for years and decades and decades. And I've heard this, and I just kind of wanted to throw it by you to see what you think about it. But a good selective cut, you can remove trees, make a profit, and then at first glance, you would know that that area has been timbered.
Well, there's a couple different things going on here. So you got to start with what you have, right? You also have to think about what are your long-term goals. So I know clear cuts get a horrible rap, right? And there's two different kinds of clear cuts out there, okay? There is the clear cut that mimics a natural disturbance. Clear cuts were designed to mimic fire. And, a lot of our species here in West Virginia are fire-loving species. The oaks, the hickories, they work on that nice deep taproot, which protects them from fire. But with a lack of fire, we'll see more maples, more beech, more of those thin bark species come in. So, it just depends on what your long-term output is. But When you do a clear cut, a proper clear cut, nothing is left. Like you said, that's just blank and empty. But what that allows is those early successional species, your black cherry, your yellow poplar, to come in and take off. Because let me tell you, that seed source, like we talk about those weed seeds, there's always a seed bed in that ground. Your tree seeds are going to sprout. And a lot of our species also root sprout and stump sprout. So you're going to have really fast growth. Now, if you're looking to renovate a oak hickory stand, let's say, you want to keep your higher value, slower growing trees, then no, you don't want to do a clear cut because those aren't the types of trees that respond to that type of activity. But if you're just looking to turn over some fast growing trees and get some yellow poplar up and out of there, then yeah, you can definitely do a clear cut. Now, a commercial clear cut is when they come in and they take out everything of commercial value, which means anything 6 inches in diameter and up that they can sell for pulp, they take and they go. They take all the saw logs, all of the pulpwood, and they leave you with the junkiest, nastiest trees that are on the site. This is a bad thing because while you still have some trees left and you may think, well, that's good, what they've left behind is a poorer quality genetic seed stock. So you have more codominant stems on your trees. You have slower growing. You have more susceptible to disease. You have all of those negative characteristics that kept these trees from being of commercial quality are now your next generation seed stock. And so you do not want a commercial clear cut. Now, a logger isn't going to name these things the same way we're naming them. We're naming them by what their impact is. So again, a good reason to work with a forester before you have a timber sale to make sure that the type of harvest is matching the long-term health of the forest land that you want.
Yeah. Hey, Karen, can you go a little bit more into the codominant stem that you mentioned in case people are not familiar with the term?
Right. So a codominant stem is basically where you have a low branching point on your tree. So instead of just being one central leader on the tree, you have 2 leaders on the tree. And in urban forestry, this is really dangerous because those 2 leaders will grow up and you'll get included bark in between those 2 leaders as they expand and grow into one another. And you might think, oh, well, in a forest environment, it's not that big a deal because I'll have 2 trees for the price of 1. But the problem is that lowers the quality of that tree. So the lower the branches on the tree, if you have branches that are below, I believe it's 16 feet, then that decreases the value of that tree because you have knots and stains and things like that that get into the wood of the tree, which lowers its value. A good quality tree, high quality veneer value tree, which is what everyone thinks of when they say black cherry or black walnut. Everyone's thinking of those high dollar veneer trees. Well, yeah, there are high dollar values in those trees, but if they have low stems, they have stains, they have broken limbs, things like that those all decrease the value of those trees. And a good forester can actually see on the bark of these trees where the damage has been done even years back. So you want to really try to maintain your forest in a healthy way so that you have higher value in those trees that you are keeping.
And that's a great example of one of the things we talked about at the beginning of the show is if you have a forest management plan, you consult a forester, and now you're going to make the first cut to improve the next cut. One of the things they do, instead of taking out the larger or the smaller trees, they could start taking out those low value trees. Give the trees that aren't able to expand because that space, that light is being taken up by a lower quality tree out of the way. The next cut now is going to be a much higher value with higher quality trees. And I know that's a simplified example, but I think that's really the best way to kind of paint the picture.
Right.
Talking to foresters a lot of my career, you start to understand that you're not necessarily going to make the most money out of that first cut by doing a forest consulting program and doing an improvement cut. But what you're doing is you're really setting yourself up for that high profitability next time.
Right. Think about your woodlands as a savings account. And depending on how you treat that savings and what activities you do to increase your interest rate or decrease your interest rate, that's going to determine what your final output is all from that forest.
Yeah. And I guess my point with that was don't get all starry-eyed when you look at money value from one cut to another, because easy come, easy go. It's do you want something that's going to maintain its value, give you a higher profit in the end, or do you want to just kind of ruin the chances of improving and getting a bigger bang for your buck at the end by just having a little bit more money in the here and now? It's something that you really got to think about with any of these big decisions, whether you're signing a contract for carbon sequestration or whether you're looking at, let's harvest the timber. These are things that families need to sit down, talk about. Everyone needs to lay out their goals. These are big decisions, and they shouldn't be made quickly.
Yeah, and I want to throw one last thing on here before we are fully out of time, and that is going back to contracts. A timber sale contract is still a contract. It is still a legally binding document, and that timber sale contract can be helpful or hurtful. So you need to make sure there are a lot of guidelines laid out in your contract. And, we can talk a little bit more about that another time. But keep in mind, a timber sale contract is just like an oil lease contract or a carbon sequestration contract. It is a contract. And if someone shows up at your door offering you big money to sign today, that's when you close the door in their face and say, no, thank you, because that is a predatory tactic that is designed to get people off guard and not thinking ahead. So if a logger shows up on your doorstep, or a forester shows up at your doorstep and says, I'll give you X number of dollars for the woods in your backyard, well, you need to stop right there and say, okay, well, I'm interested, but I need to know more information first. And that's when you reach out to your own consulting forester.
Yeah.
Because there are some contract foresters out there that work for logging companies or harvesting companies. They have a bottom line to get.
And just on that note, there are service foresters out there that are there to talk to you, to answer these questions.
Oh, yeah.
They have your interest in mind. They work for the state. They don't work on commission. Now, it might be hard to get them right away. It might take some time. But you know what? Don't be rash and make those decisions too quickly. If it takes a few months to talk to that service forester, it's worth it.
And if you are in more of a hurry, you'll get a hold of a consultant forester a little sooner than a service forester. Not to say anything bad, but yeah, they're overworked and understaffed. And it's unfortunate because it is such a valuable aspect of our states and our environment to maintain the health of our forests. But a private consultant forester who's working for you, you'll be able to get a hold of them a little bit more quickly than a service forester that's working for the state. You will have a fee. Most of them work on commission. However, if you're just getting a management plan done, typically an hourly rate can be established. But anyway, we are out of time, and I think this is a really great subject, and I'd love to talk more about it. So maybe next week.
Okay, West Virginians, this next bit is for you. A team of our colleagues from WVU are working to improve health in West Virginia. I encourage you to take the time to share your health experiences. You can take the survey online, by mail, or even over the phone. You can learn more about the Match Survey by visiting wvmatchsurvey.org.
Thanks for listening to Extension Calling. This show is a collaboration between OSU Belmont County Extension Educator Dan Lima and WVU Ohio County Extension Agent Karen Cox. If you'd like a transcript of this show, contact us at the office. Also, let us know if you enjoy the show by ranking us on your podcast app.